Aboard the deep space research vessel Andromeda's Grace, everything was quiet, save for the soft hum of machinery and the steady pulse of data streaming in from Europa. Orbiting the icy moon, the crew of scientists and engineers had spent nearly 2 months studying the frozen world below, focused on the hidden ocean beneath its thick crust. Humanity's goal was simple: find life, even microbial, and prove that Earth was not alone in its ability to support biology. Dr. Alara Singh, head of xenobiology, often said that the silence of space wasn't empty. It was waiting. And on the 71st day, space answered. Without warning, an unknown ship emerged from the darkness beyond Jupiter's shadow. It wasn't picked up on radar. It simply appeared. Smooth and metallic, its surface seemed to shift like liquid under the stars. There were no visible engines, no windows, and no obvious weapons. It hovered silently above Europa, casting an eerie shadow across Andromeda's Grace. Alarms didn't blare, but tension spread quickly. Commander Reeve, a seasoned mission leader, ordered immediate lockdown of non-essential systems and activated first contact protocols. No one on board had truly expected this moment to come, but they had trained for it all the same. Communication began not with sound, but with pulses of light and magnetic waves. The ship responded in kind, and a pattern formed, a language, or at least a form of structured logic. Within minutes, a rough translation became possible. The alien ship identified itself as a surveyor vessel from a distant species known as the Velari. Their tone, if data could have a tone, was calm, neutral, and scientific. They claimed to be peaceful explorers, traveling from system to gather environmental data and record the conditions of emerging species. Humanity, they said, was one of the youngest they had encountered, but not the first. This raised a mix of wonder and concern among the crew. They asked for an exchange, scientific data for scientific data, and offered to share charts of deep space phenomena in return for a scan of the human vessel. With some hesitation, the crew agreed. After all, if these visitors were dangerous, they had already shown their ability to appear without warning. The Velari directed a focused scan at Andromeda's Grace. It wasn't aggressive, just a quiet ripple of invisible energy passing over the hull. Sensors lit up for only a moment before going still. Inside the ship, nothing seemed to change. The crew watched and waited. Commander Reeve asked for a follow-up message from the Velari, but received only static in return. Then, something unexpected happened. The alien ship began to emit a high-frequency tone, first through direct transmission, then across multiple communication bands. It was a sound that didn't belong to any language known to humanity, but it triggered a wave of alerts in the control room. The ship's computer flagged the signal as a universal distress call. At first, the crew assumed it was a mistake, a glitch, maybe. But the signal didn't stop. It grew louder, broader. The Velari were broadcasting it in every direction, reaching deep into space. Then, without another word, the alien ship turned and began to move. Not slowly, not cautiously. It accelerated past light speed, vanishing in a single flicker against the stars. Silence returned, but this time, it wasn't waiting. It was holding its breath. The crew stared at one another, unsure what they had just witnessed. A peaceful alien species had arrived, scanned their ship, and then sent out a distress call before fleeing the system like they had seen something terrible. No weapons were fired, no threats were made. But the message was clear. Something about the human vessel, or perhaps humanity itself, had triggered fear, real fear. And now, Andromeda's Grace floated alone above Europa, with a signal echoing through space that no one on board could yet understand. But someone out there would. And they were listening. The crew of Andromeda's Grace was still in a daze after the alien ship's sudden departure. What had just happened? What had they missed? Commander Reeve stood at the helm, watching the empty space where the Velari ship had been. The quiet in the control room felt suffocating. The ship's comms had been completely silent since the Violari's abrupt retreat, leaving only the eerie hum of the ship's internal systems as background noise. The crew had tried to re-establish contact immediately after the alien ship disappeared, but all attempts had failed. The signal they had received earlier was gone, replaced by static. No one could explain why or how it had happened. As they waited for answers, Earth Command had picked up the distress signal. The message was not just a warning, it was an emergency call sent across the cosmos. The signal was coded with a sense of desperation, a cry for help that echoed through deep space. Earth Command acted swiftly, dispatching a diplomatic cruiser, the Unity, to Andromeda's Grace. The cruiser was equipped with a team of diplomats and experts, ready to make sense of the situation and, if possible, find out what had frightened the Violari so much. Meanwhile, Dr. Alara Singh, the ship's xenobiologist, had been working tirelessly to analyze the data from the Violari's scan. She noticed something that everyone else had missed. While the Violari had seemed to scan every part of Andromeda's Grace, their primary focus had been the life support systems. Specifically, the oxygen levels, carbon dioxide concentrations, and heat regulation. The Violari's technology had spent a considerable amount of time measuring the ship's atmosphere, studying the subtle balance that allowed humans to survive in the vacuum of space. It wasn't just a routine check. It was intense, almost obsessive. Dr. Singh's brow furrowed as she reviewed the data. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered under her breath. She turned to Commander Reeve, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The Violari are not just concerned about the life support system. They were focused on it, like it was a threat." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "If I didn't know better, I'd say they were scanning for something specific. About human biology." "But what?" She paused, her mind racing through possible scenarios. "Could it be our oxygen?" The thought was chilling. Oxygen, so vital for human life, was toxic to many other species in the galaxy. Some races couldn't even survive in environments with oxygen, while others could only tolerate it in low concentrations. But the Violari were advanced. They should have known that Earth's atmosphere was a natural element. So why had they reacted with such fear? What had they discovered about humans that made them flee in panic? As Dr. Singh continued her analysis, the rest of the crew tried to piece together the puzzle. It became clear that the Violari's departure had been anything but a routine retreat. The ship had accelerated to faster-than-light speed within moments, as if running from something far more dangerous than just an encounter with humans. Commander Reeves' gut told him this wasn't just about biology, it was something bigger. But what could it be? The answers began to come when the ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Roscoe, worked tirelessly to decode fragments of the Violari's transmission. Most of it was jumbled, fragmented by interference, but one part was clearer than the rest. The words repeated over and over, a single chilling phrase: extinction level. The phrase hung in the air like a specter. It wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. Whatever the Violari had learned from their scan of Andromeda's Grace, it had convinced them that humanity's presence in the galaxy posed an existential threat. To whom or to what, they did not yet know. But the repeated warning was clear. The Violari had seen something in humanity's life support system that terrified them. It was not just a natural occurrence. They had interpreted it as a danger, on a cosmic scale. Dr. Singh's face drained of color as she read the transmission again. "What if they've seen something in our biology? Something that could cause mass extinction?" she whispered. Her voice cracked, as if even she couldn't believe the words she was saying. The crew stood frozen, haunted by the implication. What was it that made the Violari call for evacuation? What was humanity carrying with them unknowingly that had forced the first contact to end in panic? The truth was beginning to unfold, and it was far darker than anyone had anticipated. Back on Earth, scientists scrambled to make sense of the Vailari's panic. The decoded transmission had shaken everyone to the core, and now the most brilliant minds were called into action. Linguists, biologists, and xenobiologists from across the world were summoned to analyze every detail of the data. The goal was clear: figure out why the Vailari had fled and what about humanity's biology had caused them to sound the alarm. Days passed, and slowly, breakthroughs began to surface. Dr. Alara Singh, who had been leading the investigation on Andromeda's Grace, received a transmission from Earth Command. The linguists had uncovered something. The Vailari, it seemed, were a silicon-based species, evolved in environments far colder and more hostile than Earth could ever imagine. Their homeworld was a frozen, methane-rich planet, where temperatures hovered near absolute zero. To them, oxygen was not just a breathing hazard, it was corrosive, a violent element that destroyed their molecular structure. Heat was even worse. To a species like the Vailari, exposed to even moderate warmth, a temperature above freezing was an existential threat. It became clearer now why the Vailari had recoiled at the sight of Andromeda's Grace. The ship's environment, warm and oxygen-rich, was not just uncomfortable to them, it was lethal. To them, humanity's very atmosphere was like an explosive, chemical reaction waiting to happen. The Vailari had spent so long scanning the ship's life support systems because they needed to understand exactly how dangerous this environment could be to them. To step into a warm, oxygen-filled ship would be like walking into a bomb factory. Their calculations had likely shown that even the smallest mistake could trigger a chain reaction, one they could never survive. But the horror didn't end there. As Dr. Singh continued her analysis, a chilling realization struck. Humans, unlike most species the Vailari had encountered, emitted both carbon dioxide and radiant body heat in quantities that could not be ignored. To the Vailari, this wasn't just a biological process. It was something far more threatening. They saw the heat radiating from human bodies as a kind of weaponized environmental manipulation. Carbon dioxide, in their perception, could be interpreted as a terraforming tool, one that altered a planet's atmosphere to make it more conducive to life, and therefore, more habitable for species like humanity. The very way humans breathed and existed in the world made them seem like a kind of environmental weapon in the eyes of the Vailari. To the Vailari, humanity wasn't just an unremarkable species in a distant corner of the galaxy. They were walking, breathing forces of nature, capable of altering entire ecosystems, and in the wrong circumstances, triggering catastrophic change. It was no wonder they had fled in fear. They hadn't seen humanity as a peaceful race. They had seen them as a force of destruction. The news sent shockwaves through the Andromeda's Grace crew. They were still reeling from the idea that their very existence could be seen as a threat to other, far more advanced species. As they reviewed the scan data, it became increasingly clear how the Vailari had interpreted everything. The level of misunderstanding between the two species was profound. Humanity's simple survival in its own environment, breathing, generating heat, and exhaling carbon dioxide, was being read as a catastrophic environmental weapon. Meanwhile, the Vailari, now in full retreat, had begun broadcasting warnings throughout the nearby systems. The messages were short, chilling, and filled with urgency. Across the galaxy, those who could hear the signal were given one simple directive: a heat-borne species walks the void. Evacuate or perish. The Vailari had issued the kind of warning that made an entire sector hold its breath. If humans truly were as dangerous as the Vailari had painted them, what would this mean for the future of human exploration? Would other species take the Vailari's warning seriously? Or would they, like the Vailari themselves, see humanity as an unavoidable danger too wild and unpredictable to coexist with? The message was clear. The galaxy was now aware of humanity's existence. And the first impression had been made, not as a peaceful civilization, but as a possible threat to the very fabric of space itself. Would this be the beginning of a long, difficult road for humanity, trying to prove its place in the cosmos? Or had they unwittingly become something much darker in the eyes of the universe? The atmosphere aboard the neutral orbital station known as the Ether Ring was tense. Representatives from several species, each with their own unique biology and environment, had gathered for an emergency summit. The vast, sterile station floated in the void of space, a place where peace could be negotiated and, perhaps, crisis averted. At the center of this council was humanity, represented by Captain Reeve and Dr. Ilara Singh, both of whom had been invited to explain their species after the Vailari's dramatic warning. They were surrounded by alien envoys, each one encased in environmental suits designed to protect them from the very air that humans breathed. The tension in the room was palpable. The eyes of every envoy were on Earth's representatives, waiting for answers. The council chamber was filled with a low hum as the delegates took their places. The species assembled here had lived for centuries, even millennia, in the cold depths of space or on frozen worlds, far from the warmth and oxygen that humanity thrived in. To them, humans were an anomaly, a species that seemed to defy the natural order. Where others had evolved to survive in harsh environments, humanity had built its civilization in a world that was, in their eyes, too warm, too volatile. Many of the species present regarded humans with suspicion, seeing them as a heat plague, a force of nature that could alter entire ecosystems and destabilize the galaxy if allowed to grow unchecked. The debate began immediately. Some of the council members proposed quarantine, an isolation of all human vessels to prevent any further spread of what they saw as a potential ecological disaster. Others, more cautious, suggested containment, monitoring humanity closely, but allowing limited interaction. Captain Reeve stood at the front of the room, his face calm but his mind racing. He had not come to defend humanity as a superior species, but as one that was simply different, vulnerable even. Dr. Singh, standing beside him, was ready to present her case. She had spent hours preparing simulations that compared human fragility to the resilience of other interstellar races. She projected a hologram of Earth, showing its history of survival in a harsh, chaotic environment, a planet constantly battered by asteroids, floods, and changing climates. "We did not build civilization in spite of a hostile world," she explained to the council, "but because of it. Our species has learned to adapt, to thrive, where others might have perished." She continued, emphasizing that humanity's rise to dominance had been through cooperation, not through conquest. Unlike the Vailari and other advanced species, humans had never had the luxury of a stable environment. They were creatures of adaptation, not destruction. Her words seemed to resonate with a few of the delegates. Some appeared intrigued by the idea of humanity's resilience, while others still maintained their wariness. There were murmurs of consideration as they weighed the possibilities, but no one was willing to offer full trust just yet. Humanity had already made a powerful first impression, one that could not be undone. Still, Dr. Singh's argument that humans were fragile, vulnerable, and capable of learning through their mistakes seemed to plant a seed of doubt in the minds of some. However, just as the council seemed to be reaching a fragile impasse, a faction, known as the Cold Choir, stood up. This group of cryogenic species, whose biology thrived in frozen environments, had remained quiet during the earlier discussions, observing in silence. But now, they moved as one, their cold, emotionless eyes fixed on the representatives from Earth. Their leader, a tall, spectral figure encased in a shimmering frost suit, addressed the council with a chilling calmness. "We have seen the damage that species like humanity can cause," the leader said in a low, resonant voice. "They are too volatile, too unpredictable. The Vailari were wise to flee, and we will not make the same mistake. the Cold Choir proposed a radical course of action: preemptive exile. They argued that humanity, with its uncontrolled environment and volatile biology, posed a threat too great to allow in the galaxy. The suggestion was to send all human vessels out of the known systems, beyond the reach of civilized space. The motion, if passed, would mean that humanity's place in the galaxy was uncertain at best, and at worst, completely erased. The council was split, and the room buzzed with heated discussion. But before any vote could be called, the lights flickered. The room grew quiet as an unexpected signal interrupted the proceedings. A Vylari scout had reappeared. Its ship appeared on the council's scanners, entering the system with remarkable speed. This was not just any scout. It was the same vessel that had fled Andromeda's grace weeks earlier. The Cold Choir immediately fell silent, their eyes narrowing. The scout's message came through, cutting through the tension in the room. "We have misjudged. The humans are not the threat we thought. You must reconsider. There is something you do not understand." The council held its collective breath. What had changed? Why was the Vylari returning now? And what new revelation did they bring with them? The council chamber was silent as the Vylari scout's transmission echoed through the room. For a brief moment, the stillness was overwhelming. Every delegate, every species present, held their breath as they processed the words that had just been delivered. The Vylari, those who had once fled in terror from humanity's warmth, now spoke with an entirely different tone. The voice from the scout ship, once so filled with fear, now carried an air of wonder and caution. "We have misjudged," the Vylari leader on the scout ship admitted. "After further analysis of human biology and their interactions with their environment, we now realize that humanity is not the threat we thought it was. Far from being destructive, humanity's incredible adaptability is unlike anything we have ever encountered." The room was filled with gasps, some of disbelief, others of cautious curiosity. The Vylari continued, "Instead of being a danger to the galaxy, we believe that humanity may be uniquely suited to reverse entropy zones, regions of the galaxy that are decaying, lifeless, and too volatile for most species to enter." The words hung in the air. Entropy zones. Vast areas of space where stars were dying, planets were barren, and entire systems had fallen into disrepair. These regions were void of life, inhospitable to the majority of sentient species. Most civilizations avoided them, recognizing that such places were beyond the scope of their reach. But the Vylari's sudden shift in perspective changed everything. Humanity, they now saw, was not only capable of surviving in such harsh conditions, but thriving in them. Earth's history was one of overcoming insurmountable challenges, from surviving ice ages to mastering life on an unstable planet. The Vylari, whose biology had been refined for cold, sterile environments, now recognized humanity's unparalleled ability to adapt to the most unpredictable and extreme circumstances. Instead of simply avoiding entropy zones, humanity could enter these areas, and with time, breathe life back into them. The Vylari believed that humanity's biological processes, its warmth, its carbon dioxide emissions, its interaction with ecosystems, could be the key to revitalizing these dead regions. The council was stunned. Species that had once been on the edge of voting for humanity's exile were now reevaluating everything. The Cold Choir, which had been the most vocal in their call for humanity's isolation, now found themselves quiet, processing the revelation. The other species, once fearful of the so-called heat plague, began to exchange uncertain glances. It didn't take long for the council to act. One by one, the species began to reverse their stance, realizing that humanity's survival instincts could be the galaxy's salvation. Instead of seeing humans as a danger, they now saw them as a potential ally, even a vanguard. Where other species had once feared their ability to spread, they now recognized the possibility that humans could heal. the very qualities that had made humanity seem so dangerous. Its warmth, its emissions, its relentless drive to adapt, could be the key to restoring dying regions of the galaxy. After a long, deliberative pause, the Council reached a unanimous decision. Humanity would no longer be seen as a threat. Instead, Earth's crew was offered an alliance charter, a partnership in which humanity could assist in the revitalization of entropy zones, bringing life back to the most desolate corners of the galaxy. The terms of the charter were simple. Humanity would work as part of a coalition to restore decaying systems, using their unique biology and technology to slowly undo the damage that had been done. It was a historic moment, one that marked the beginning of humanity's journey from fear to hope in the eyes of the galaxy. Captain Reeves stood at the front of the room, once fearing exile, now realizing that his worst fears had been replaced with something far more extraordinary: a role in the future of the galaxy. His thoughts raced as he realized that humanity was about to embark on something unimaginable. Earth had not only survived its own world, but now it had the chance to help restore others. As the council members voted and the decision was made, Captain Reeve felt a deep sense of awe and gratitude. His crew had faced extinction, and now they were poised to play a pivotal role in the galaxy's future. The final words of the Vailari, Scout echoed in his mind, sealing the fate of humanity's place in the stars. They came to warn the galaxy of our danger, but stayed to invite us into its hope.